everyone, and welcome back to the Nap Trapped podcast. How are you, Beck?
I'm good, Sally. How are you?
Good. We're just pretending like we haven't spent the last 45 minutes catching up and gossiping and chin wagging before we actually hit record
I
on
know.
this.
I never actually know what to say. How are you? Oh my God. Anyway.
Surprise! Ta-da! We're here.
Yes, I always like the little chin wag we have. We do like to warm up the vocal cords for
That's
a
it.
good
La
while
la la
before
la
we
la.
record.
Today's episode, let's just dive in. The 8-month
Let's
sleep
do it. It's a good one.
regression. Regressions are something that come up all the time, quite literally. The baby sleep regresses. And there's a lot of commonly sort of ones that are benchmarked by age. We've got the 4-month regression. We've got people talk about a 6-month regression, 8-month regression. Today we're talking about the regression that can often happen between sort of 8 and 10 months, commonly referred to as the 8-month sleep regression. But what's your take on this, Beck? I think let's just get straight into it. What's your feelings on baby
No.
sleep regressions? A big question.
It is. It's a bit of a big one because I do feel like there are some genuine regressions. Obviously, the 4-month one because your sleep
Definitely.
cycles are maturing. So I feel like that is like an actual regression. The other regressions that I really do subscribe to are like the 18-month regression and the 2-year regression. Not all little ones will go through every regression. So
No.
that is something to note. All babies will go through the 4-month one. So whether they're at 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5 months, wherever that sort of takes them, they will go through that. There's no avoiding that one. But in terms of the 8-month regression, I feel like a lot of families are really starting to feel oh my God, the 8-month regression is coming up, and they really feel quite strongly that a lot of things are going to go sort of south, with this 8-month regression. So it gets a bad rap. My take on this regression is actually that it's not a one single thing that is happening to impact your little one's sleep. It's a series of things that need to be looked at individually. So at around the 8, 9, 10-month mark, you've got your transition from 3 to 2 naps. So that'll happen somewhere between 8 and 9 months. There is separation anxiety that peaks at around that 9-month mark. There is your little one learning more mobility. So typically the pulling to stand, action will start to sort of, come to life, and you'll have a little one that's standing up in their cot and, unable to get back down. So we have to work through that. And then the last one would be teething. So lots of big factors to combat and find a workaround for.
I'm going to be splitting hairs here. Can we go back to the 4-month sleep regression for a second? Because I am in complete agreement that all babies will go through the sleep cycle change where their sleep cycles mature, but they won't all necessarily experience a sleep regression or a regression in their sleep. And I think that, because I'm the first to say, absolutely. I mean, my babies must have had their sleep cycles mature, but I never experienced a regression in their sleep. And similarly, all babies are going to experience learning to pull up, crawling, increased mobility, object permanence, toothy pegs growing, but whether or not and to what extent it impacts their sleep is going to be very baby dependent. But it is such a huge age of change and transition, and it's kind of can become this perfect storm of all of these things culminating in a regression, and so it gets put under this umbrella term of 8-month sleep regression.
Yes, I agree. And you're exactly right. Like the 4-month regression, the cycles will change. And I'll bang on about it again. But not every little one will have a regression as such. So in terms of the 8-month regression, and like you need to sort of work on sort of doing your own super sleuth work in terms of what is it that you are experiencing. So if you find yourself, oh my goodness, sleep was, looking quite schmick up until around this point, and then sleep is starting to take a bit of a nosedive, have a little deep dive into what's going on around you and trying to sort of figure out exactly what it might be that is triggering the sleep challenges. The first thing to sort of look at would be your nap structure and sort of
Definitely.
and whether you're still on a still on a 3-nap schedule, or you've moved to a 2-nap schedule. Ordinarily, when you are moving to a 2-nap schedule, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 9 months. There is a bit of a big change in terms of the spread of sleep or distribution of sleep over the course of the day. And when you are moving to a 2-nap schedule, even though you might absolutely nail your naps, your new feed times, the solids, and your bedtime is hunky-dory, you may experience some little night blips as your little one becomes more accustomed to the sleep pressure that they're going into bed with. So it's a new wake window, and they need to be able to start adjusting to that. So there can be a few little blips or hairy moments over the course of the night that
Just
may
like
impact.
a mini dose of jet lag.
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
as their little body clock changes. And if you haven't already, the very first episode of our Nap Trapped podcast is all about holding on to 3 naps for as long as possible so that you do have as smooth a transition as possible. So if you haven't already, I highly recommend going back to listening to that one, because when you then hit 8 months, then you'll be able to rule out, okay, this isn't happening because of a wonky schedule.
Yeah, exactly right. The next thing to consider is teething. And so there is no getting out of teething. Your little one is going to pop new little toothy pegs all the time. And some will be more impacted than others with teething.
I'm a bit of a tough crowd when it comes to teething and sleep, purely because, and look, there is research that backs this, that, I mean, teething happens for years. And so what I find is that if a baby may already be struggling with sleep and they're already likely to wake out of a sleep cycle and look for help. If there's then another added layer of discomfort, I'm not saying that toothy pegs don't hurt, and some absolutely teeth harder and, get a whole grill at once, as opposed to just like one polite tooth every couple of months. But it just is that additional layer if sleep is probably not, as you would say, already looking schmick. And then if things are looking very good and then you can see that a tooth is starting to cut through, absolutely, there's context, okay, it'll take a couple of days and we'll ride this out and then it should get better. It shouldn't be that teething totally sets everything back from weeks to months on end, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. I feel like you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that if your little one isn't sleeping well to begin with, then the teeth issue is probably going to impact a little more. And that's usually because when little ones are going to bed, if they're not the most well-rested little one in the world, they're going to go in with elevated levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So not stress the way that you and I would feel stress, but it's more so that they're on a second wind. And so quite often, anything can wake them. Like it can just be, so if there's a little bit of discomfort, a well-rested baby may be able to sort of breeze through and just keep connecting sleep cycles and so forth. But if for a little one who is just slightly overtired and they've got a little bit of cortisol, then a little, niggle or nudge or some sort of discomfort is going to sort of impact them a little bit more, and then they tend to wake a little bit more easily as well. So how we sort of navigate through teething is...
what do you recommend to your families?
If there is like signs, obvious signs through the day, so teething signs, red rosy cheeks, maybe they've got a runny bum, all those sort of classic symptoms, chewing on things, lots of drool. Maybe there's white raised gums, that's always a clear indicator that there is some teeth that are about to erupt. Usually it's the days leading up to the eruption that hurt the most or they're going to cause the most disruption. So when you see that, then I always encourage families to consider offering pain relief, and if they want to chat with their GP or their pharmacist about what,
good disclaimer. I love that.
Yes, could be worth
not medical advice.
Yeah, not medical advice. But it is one of those things, like if you see that they're in a little bit of discomfort or pain, then it's an easy way to rule it out. And, so if there's clear indications through the day, then I'm just going to encourage my families, look, see if you can time it well through the day so that before bed you're able to give a dose, so you can sort of start the night off with, a full dosage under the belt. I would always try and encourage families to consider Nurofen or what's the technical term for that, medical lady?
Ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen, that's right.
There you go.
Because
that was a pop
it
quiz.
targets. Yes, it was just straight out there. You win $5. Because it targets the pain. So Panadol and Nurofen will work differently, and Nurofen will target the pain, and it will give you a longer time frame that it will work for. So I try and encourage families to do that. And then what I would do is, if you've offered it at bedtime, then making sure that if they wake overnight, that you are actually continuing to dose them up at the correct times. So don't just assume that once they've been given a dose at bedtime that will last them the entire night. If after 6 hours the little one is waking and you know that they're due the next dose, then I would typically go straight in with the next
Just nip it in the bud.
dose.
Yeah. Don't sleep train through pain.
Yes, no, exactly right. So, so that would be the key factor, actually. That tip would be to make sure that you're not starting a sleep, like if you are sleep training, don't start the sleep training technique until you have offered that next dose.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, just make sure that they've got coverage. If they're requiring analgesia and pain relief, make sure that they're well covered and that it's had time to kick in before you look at resettling and or sleep training. And I think if you do notice, maybe you haven't done any sleep training at all up until this point, and you notice a tooth about to cut through, hold off, work on some of the sleep foundations, wait for that tooth to cut through. Once it's through the gum, then I would say to families, okay, now you can sleep train. You don't have to put everything on hold because of a tooth. To be honest, I've never noticed my babies teething in terms of sleep. They'll wake up and be like, oh, goodness, what's that fang doing that's erupted overnight? I do truly believe that an otherwise great sleeper and well-rested baby will just glide on through teeth. And if they don't, it should be a very short-lived blip. You understand the content. We've got the content. We can see 3 teeth erupting. We treat it. We meet their needs. And then we just get back on track when those teeth are out. I think one of the other things that commonly happens is increased mobility and the freedom both in the cot and, the exhaustion factor of crawling, pulling up, couch surfing. So making sure that during this age and stage that your little one isn't too overtired because they are using all of this energy. So even more reason why I really like to stick to an age-appropriate schedule. And if at 8 months that is still 3 naps because your baby's still taking that 3rd nap, fantastic. Don't drop it just because they are 8 months old and your neighbour's baby has dropped it already. They need to be well rested because they're doing all of these amazing physical feats. In terms of pulling up and standing up in the cot, this is something that we see that understandably can actually interrupt sleep. It can become a very fun new trick that, hey, mum, look at me. I can pull up in my sleeping bag. What are we going to do about it? And it can fast become a 2-player game. I stand up, mum comes and gets me, mum or dad or whoever it is, comes and gets me. They lay me back down. I pull up and rinse and repeat for the whole nap length and multiple times overnight. What I usually find is that lots of practice during the day. We want to encourage that couch surfing, counter surfing, and support your baby in learning how to, in fact, get back down. Because it's usually that they haven't figured out quite yet, and definitely not at 3 a.m. when no one's thinking straight, I need to bend my knees in order to get back down. What I usually tell families that if this starts to happen in the cot, do lots of practice during the day. And if you notice that my baby can very easily get up and down by themselves, then in the cot, you know that they can do the same and you mostly leave them to it. less is definitely more in that case. If they haven't quite mastered that getting down phase, rather than going in and picking your baby up and popping them back down. If anyone's watching this on YouTube, if we put a clip up, I am doing the action. Rather than scooping them up and laying them down on their back only for them to be a jack in the box and pop back up, it's actually more about getting them used to that feeling of being unbalanced and wobbly as they try and get back down. So what I usually say is gently curl their little fingers and sort of hold their hands and guide them during that wobble and the bending of the knees back down. If you're doing timed checks, or if you're doing a FERB or a modified FERB, or if that's what you've traditionally done when you have sleep trained, you just do that action at each of your timed checks. You don't need to go in extra so that it doesn't become gamified. And then once you know that your baby can get down and you've seen it, what they do during sleep is kind of up to them. The more you go in, the more it reinforces, I'm going to just stand back up so mum and dad or whoever come and get me.
It's one of those things where once they learn that skill of how to get back down all on their own and sit on their bottoms and things, you'll probably find that they don't tend to stand up that often after that.
The novelty wears off, doesn't it?
The novelty wears off, and the novelty definitely wears off if there's not a two-player game like you referred to. So if they're just standing in the cot and they're just waiting for you to, and then you're and you can see that they're totally fine on the monitor and they're just standing up waiting for you to come in the door. Once they realize that they can actually put themselves back on their bottoms and take themselves off to sleep, then that's when you find that game is just sort of over and done with, and it's something that you don't really have to navigate your way through again. But it is an intense, focused time frame. Like I would say that from the time that your little one learns to pull to stand to when you're able just to let them stand in the cot and then sit themselves back down is probably something like 10 to 14 days. So you do want to make sure that you are spending focused time on that and that you're not sort of doing it in dribs and drabs, because the faster they learn how to do this for themselves, the easier it is for you to get back on track, for sure.
Sometimes I do also see babies, whether or not they've always been great sleepers and it's just part of this skill set, or you're starting sleep training at this age and they can stand at the same time, is that sometimes babies will fall asleep sitting up, and it's always so cute on the monitors. They just nod off. If you see that happen,
bears.
Oh, they're so sweet in their little cozy sleeping bags. Yes. You just go in and lie them down. It usually happens if it's part of the first couple of nights of sleep training ever. It's usually the first night or two maximum, and then they've totally figured out, I just lie on my tummy or I roll over or do whatever I do to drift off to sleep. But some babies, especially with this new skill, do sit up and nod off. And so if you see that, just go in and lie that beautiful baby down. And again, that is very short-lived. And I always love seeing it on the monitor. It's just so cute.
I know, it's so beautiful. You forget those little moments so quickly, in terms of from, the tough, the tough start to learning how to sit back down, and then that little moment of cuteness. And then, 17 years later, like myself, you sort of forget that
well, isn't that the beauty of this job? Happened. We get to relive it for all of the families that we work with, but we have the added benefit of knowing how good is it on the other side, that these things are short-lived, that there's sleep light at the end of the tunnel, that it'll all be okay, and then we get to enjoy those sweet little baby moments.
I know.
With our families. The other thing I want to touch on, what were you going to say?
No. I was going to get cracking onto the last little blip that happens.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of the increased mobility, let's just talk about the hunger factor.
Oh, yeah. Very important.
Because with increased mobility, it comes increased energy exertion, and we want to be meeting our baby's caloric needs during the day, during this time. And as babies get older, caloric needs go up. So how do you factor that in for your families, Bec?
This sort of starts with the scheduling for me. So usually between 8 and 9 months, like we keep banging on about, we're dropping from 3 to 2 naps. And when we drop from 3 to 2 naps, we are typically moving from 4 milk feeds to 3 milk feeds through the day. The reason for that is exactly how you were mentioning before. Our little ones are now exerting a lot more energy, and now we need to keep backing them up with, extra calories. And to do that, we pull the 11 o'clock milk feed out of the mix so that we can start really ramping their appetite up for a really big lunch. We put a lot of protein and carbs into the mix at lunch, so we start upping the volume in terms of how much our little ones are eating. And then we are shifting those milk feeds a little. So we are still always having 2 milk feeds in the second half of the day, but we're spacing them so that we can get a really great appetite for solids back into the mix. And then that also leads into a really great dinner time, adding protein in if we are sort of moving away from more of a carb-based evening meal, which we do in the early days. But yeah, we are always sort of manipulating the day in terms of where we're putting solids, how much we're offering, and milk as an accompaniment to the solids as well. So we're always making sure that we're getting at least 3 complete milk feeds through the day. So big appetite for the milk feeds, that we're not, that those milk feeds aren't being impacted by the solids, but we are always increasing the amount of solids our little ones are having at that particular time.
What I might do is pop in the show notes, because I'm aware that if I read out a schedule, it can sound just like a whole lot of numbers being thrown at you.
Yeah.
So we'll pop a couple of example schedules for this 8, 9, 10 month period for anyone that's interested, just as a starting point in the show notes, so that you have some numbers to match what we're talking about and where we would put milk and solids in the way that we
you'll
work.
Find that when you listen to these episodes, how we really feel like having a really great schedule is so impactful for little ones, and how they are able to manage their naps more easily, and how they manage their nights, and how it builds confidence around, families in terms of how they manage their nights as well.
Absolutely.
I think we do get a little excited about schedules and the way that we sort of time everything to make sure it's all optimized.
But it gives parents, I think, something tangible to work towards. There's no tears involved with a schedule, which is one of the main things that we're always trying to minimize. But I think what you touched on is the confidence aspect for parents. This is something I was talking about with a family on a consult yesterday, is that the checklist that I know that we all go through as parents come bedtime, even if you have had a great sleeper, your baby's now 9 months and you're hitting what feels like this 8-month sleep regression. You're noticing all of these physical and mental developments and leaps and all of those things. And you're getting overnight wakings, you're getting bedtime battles, you're getting early, whatever it is all the things that go through our mind, even the minds of sleep consultants when it's our own babies. Have I fed them enough? Is this because the last wake window was too short? Are they too cold? Are they too hot? Was their second nap too long? Did I not do ... all of these things that race through our mind. So I think one of the main desires and goals for us as your sleep consultants is that come bedtime and come these overnight blips, you don't have to go through that checklist. You can do a very quick run through and say, yep, my baby's had these 3 great milk feeds. We've had protein at lunchtime. We've had protein at dinner.
Yeah.
They've had 2 or 3 well-timed naps. We've done our beautiful bedtime routine. This makes sense. There's a lot going on for my baby during this age and stage. My job here is to be consistent. I can see a tooth. I'm going to meet their needs in terms of pain relief if appropriate. And then my job is to hold steady and guide them through this. I don't need to add in variables. I don't need to suddenly bring them to my bed unless that's what I'm wanting, because all of that it's a bit of Pandora's box, we open a can of worms and then it's like, okay, how do we get back with an older baby to that great sleep? So we just review the foundations always, and then the parent's job is just to be confident and clear about what happens overnight and meet their baby's needs if and when needed reactively, rather than like, oh my goodness, 8-month sleep regression. How am I going to survive?
And that's exactly how you can pinpoint what is happening during that time frame. So like you said, well rested, it's not a nap transition issue overnight. Is my little one sort of showing some teething signs? Yes. Okay, well let's sort that out. There's the pulling to stand. Once you've sorted that out, then there may be the very last thing that we sort of consider with the 8-month regression, which is the separation anxiety peak,
Oh,
which
yes.
happens around that 9-month mark, which can often feel a little bit, a little bit painful through the day, if I'm brutally honest, because you will leave the room, like you'll pop baby down, you can hear your phone ringing, or, you need to stir something on the stove, something like that. You leave the room for 10 seconds and already your little one is going, wow, like, come back.
Yeah, or you just hand them to the other parent so you can have a wee.
Yeah.
No, just me?
Yeah. But you'll just hear them, and it's because that has suddenly peaked again. It peaks around the 6-month mark, but also you get another one around the 9 months. So it can be really hard. As soon as you leave the room, you feel like they're sort of kicking off. During the day, in order to sort of encourage our little ones to understand that even though you can't see me, I still come back, we do games through the day, such as hiding behind the couch, playing peekaboo, walking out of the room just ever so swiftly, and then sort of popping your head through the hallway, like you are just sort of playing these you can't see me, now you can sort of games with them. And gradually you're spending longer, you can't see me, and then you can.
Yeah.
So, and by longer, I'm just saying it's like, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But of course, when you actually do have to do these big jobs of actually going to the toilet and you are out of the room for a couple of minutes at a time.
How
it's
dare
part
we?
of, how dare we? It is a teachable moment. Like you don't have to feel guilty about going and doing a wee. Like it just is what it is. And, it's a stage. And the more we sort of play around with that whole idea that even though you can't see me, I still come back, that's how you're going to get through the separation. Eventually it does settle down. So you just sort of need to sort of move through that. In terms of overnight and how that might impact sleep, if you've nutted out all the other things that we've sort of previously talked about, then if there are some random wakings that aren't happening because of a dodgy schedule through the day or wonky feeds or anything that you can attribute to that, then maybe there is a little bit of separation anxiety. And so to do that, my best tip would be actually to sort of do exactly what you do through the day. You can, here I am, you can see me, and now I'm ducking back out again. So not sort of adding into the, you need me to stay in the room until you go back off to sleep, but just a quick reassurance in terms of I'm still here, and you can, hand them their comforter, pop their dummy back in for them, and then head back out of the room again. So sometimes that's just all the reassurance that they need. So you're trying and doing is, meeting your little one's needs, absolutely.
Really
but
responsive.
trying not to add anything into the mix that doesn't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great example of when there is separation anxiety, we will never tell you that you can't go into your baby. What we would encourage is, as you said, having a teachable moment during the day, and again, just following through and remaining consistent overnight so that there's not something extra that is worth waking up for, like, oh, now mum does sit next to me all night long, when that's not something you may be wanting to carry on with for the next however many months. Sometimes at around this age, I do suggest to parents, and look, it is a very personal decision, is whether or not their baby will in fact sleep better in their own space. So if an 8-month-old, 9-month-old, 10-month-old baby is very aware of mum or dad or any parent or guardian in the same sleeping space with them, then that can also be a cause of stimulation and fun and games, and babies will often do better in their own space. Now, I know that the Red Nose guidelines here in Australia recommend room sharing for 6 to 12 months. They are guidelines, and so I often just flag it for families if they feel comfortable that this can be an option if they find that my baby's just waking to see me
just
and play with me at 2 a.m. then I would definitely be flagging that as something to consider, or at least moving their cot as far away as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that whole thing that once they realize they can pull to stand and sort of wave and grab your attention in multiple ways, it can be very stimulating for little ones. And then obviously you're in the same room listening to it all unfold. It can be very difficult to ignore.
And very easy to over respond, and then
Yes.
it all starts to snowball.
Exactly.
The other thing that I think is worth mentioning, we might have even touched on this on another episode, but sometimes when babies do learn to stand and pull up, that is usually a signal to me that a lot of hands-on settling techniques, such as pick up, put down, or even shush pat, are no longer productive or no longer effective. A lot of babies outgrow it a little bit earlier, but once they can stand up, again, it does become a two-player game. If your technique up until that point was pick up until calm, shush back down, then it no longer works.
No, because it tends to then become I stand up, you lay me down, I stand up, you lay me down. And it becomes far too stimulating. There's nothing being achieved in that moment.
No.
And and shush pat as well. It's very you can't.
Well, I don't know if you've
hold
tried.
your
It's
baby
very
down.
hard to pat a standing baby. So, but if we talk about if you're doing something like a quick timed check and even meeting your baby's needs in terms of separation anxiety, and you're just doing a quick little check-in, I sometimes just pat the mattress instead of trying to pat a baby. I just pat the mattress a couple of times and say my sleepy phrase just to say, hey, this is where you're meant to go, and still create that pattern. You've had your 5 or 10 seconds in there, and then out you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think definitely some techniques have their shelf life. Usually by that stage, that's when it's done and dusted for us.
So I think all of that to say, regressions happen to the best of sleepers. We've got sickness, travel, teeth. There is a lot going on in that 8 to 10 month stage. And so there is commonly a regression in sleep for a lot of babies, not all babies, and it's not always as significant as it is for others. Whenever this happens, we go back to the basics. We go back to the great milk feeds. We go back to the great age-appropriate nap schedule. Have we dropped 2 naps too early? Do we need to keep that third nap? Or maybe are we trying to flog this third nap, and when in fact our 9-month-old baby needs to be on 2 naps? Really overcorrected after listening to our podcast episode. Is this a matter of standing up, pulling up, some overtiredness due to all of these physical milestones? Get everything looking tidy and then just guide your baby consistently and confidently through with a great technique that's really responsive.
And I think if you are ever unsure about what it is that is leading to the challenges overnight, both Sally and I have amazing packages that we can offer in terms of helping you get your sleep back on track, one-on-one packages. There's, lots of different options that we both offer. So please don't hesitate in reaching out to us and figuring out what would suit you best and get you back on track.
There's nothing like having a fresh, well-rested pair of eyes, take a look at the schedule and say, bingo. That's it. And this is what you can do about it, because I absolutely appreciate you can have watched all of our reels, watched all of our TikToks, tuned into all of these episodes, and you can understand, but it's the actually following through at 2 a.m. and trying to piece it all together that can be really tricky, especially when sleep deprived. So absolutely do not hesitate to reach out to us for help. That is exactly what we are here for, regardless of the age and the regression.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is what we do. Okay, well, I think that pretty much sums it up for this age and stage and what we will refer to as the 8-month sleep regression.
Yep.
But it's nothing to fear. Your baby may never go through it. Just keep on keeping them.
Keep on keeping on. You'll be fine.
All right. Well, we will see you on the next episode of Nap Trapped, unless we see you in our DMs before, and we are more than happy to help.
Excellent. Until next time, Nap Trappers, we'll see you soon.
Bye.